one of the skills that developers need to learn. Remember, you asked me about the developers that are sad because you're taking away from me coding everything. Hey, that's a very interesting field to learn. And that field is like, first of all, how do you bring a lot of context? And then how do you phrase the questions, the prompts, which is a very important skill to learn.
Hey, Luca here. Welcome to a new episode of the Refactoring podcast, where every 2 weeks we interview a world-class tech leader. Today's guest is Ori Keren, who is CEO and co-founder of LinearB and has more than 25 years of experience in the industry, especially in developer experience and productivity. With Ori, we talked about how AI is infiltrating all the stages of the development process, from coding to testing to code reviews. We discussed how AI is already restructuring teams and how engineering leaders can drive adoption by combining culture, small wins, and full moonshots. So let's dive right into it. Welcome, Ori, and thank you so much for being on the show today.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Luca.
So, Ori, you're the CEO and co-founder of LinearB. You have more than 25 years of experience in the industry, and we have also known each other for quite some time. LinearB and Refactoring have run industry reports together. We have written articles, done webinars, and more. But the occasion to have you on the show came because I saw a recent interview of yours where you predicted that developer productivity is going to decline in 2025. And when I saw that, I thought, wow, this is wild. I have to get Ori on the show to chat about this. So walk me through your predictions for 2025 with AI and everything that's going on.
Yeah, I think this was on on a different interview. And first of all, I think most of the changes that happen, and this is like a very significant change, they have this curve where you first see a decline. A lot of things are in mess. They're still not like, organized together, still in the storming phase until, it gets stable. And then I would definitely think like in 26, 27, like developer productivity will be much better than it is today. But there's still going to be those phases of adoption, failures, people doing like the wrong things, which is very natural. And that's why I had this bold prediction that 2025 will be still like, a lot of people running, trying to figure things out. So that's where it started from, like the idea. But we can develop it more if you want.
Yes, because I think this is like also works as a direct response to those thinking that AI as a novelty in coming coding tools and all kinds of tools for the development process. Many think that it's like a plug and play improvement that these tools are now improved through AI and you just get more productivity out of the box. While instead, I think that what you mean here is that it's not just like that simple, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a bunch of things happening. Very, very interesting times, by the way, to be a developer and a manager, and definitely to lead a company that tries like to improve the engineering and developer productivity. So I think, first of all, I think it's really different if you are starting a company or you have an idea and get from 0 to 1 with a prototype. It's completely different than if you have a company with, 1,000 developers, a couple of hundreds of microservices out there in production, and what you can get out of AI varies between those two.
Yeah.
Now, of course, like we read all these blogs and we see all these examples of how amazing it is, and I'm seeing them and unfortunately not coding anymore, but like still obsessed with it. So sitting with my developers, say, hey, show me like what you're doing with the cursor, with all these things. And really you can shorten the time like for a prototype or an MVP dramatically. So I would divide it into two kind of like areas. One is that companies that start today and have the privilege to be like AI first and get to MVP faster.
Yeah.
And then those same companies or companies that are has been out there for a couple of years. How do they adopt AI? What does it mean? Like they have code that need to be maintained. They have services out in production, the changes and what the impact is doing. It's like two different paradigms, and that's an interesting topic like to develop and dive deeper into.
Yeah, I agree. And I agree that when you look through social media, especially LinkedIn and X, most examples that you see that appear to be mind blowing are actually like greenfield development. So, like new projects created from scratch, maybe with vibe coding, right? But of course, it's way harder to show more nuanced examples of how an existing team, maybe in a larger organization, actually takes advantage of these tools. So what you're saying is that it's harder in that case, and it's not just as immediate that you flip a switch and you get like twice as fast as in coding or whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. But having said that, it's harder. I think this shift is big. This AI movement is big. Is something that will impact SDLC as a whole. So companies that are out there with like teams and processes, they need to start thinking, how do they adopt it?
Yeah.
They can't just like ignore that thing that happened and say, oh no, this is just for greenfield and
Yeah.
not for us. So it's almost like they need to have a plan on the phases that they're going through. So it's a lot of interesting things. I think that also like the models themselves today are the models are great, and LLMs and all this movement is like mind blowing. But they'll be as good as the context and the data you feed them. And
Yeah.
today, most of the context is okay. Here's my code base. So probably they can help generate code. They don't know like you don't feed them with the logs from your observability tool and your
Right.
SRE data. That's okay. Services are up, down. Hey, this change caused the service like to degrade. By the way, I think that will reach at one point.
Yeah.
But today, like most of the context they have is like solely focused on like the code generation process. There's a lot of things that need to happen across the way afterwards to get like solid, architected software out that they're not handling today. But
Yeah.
by the way, I think it's temporary, and they will reach there as well.
Yeah, I love your angle about context because I mean, when you look at case studies, we have enough problems already loading context from large code bases into like AI coding assistants and LLMs. But what you're saying is basically that's just a small chunk of the whole context that goes into an engineer's mind when they have to write code, because then there is the like memories about how some code change in fact affected like logs in production, observability stuff. But if you expand the scope, there are of course OKRs for the quarter and what goes into the leadership mind and feedback that you received. All of this stuff LLMs know nothing about
Today, yeah.
today.
Today. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And there's another thing, even in the code creation process or like the shipping software process, I think there's a strong focus on still generating code. There are things now, okay, around code reviews, test completion, etc. But there's a lot more focus about generating code. I use this analogy a lot that basically what happened, there's PR inflation. We saw a research that we did in LinearB, still even before AI, around like just bots, these security bots that are telling you, hey, upgrade this package, upgrade that package. You have organization, the average organization have the volume of the pull requests that these bots are generating is 15% of the overall pull requests. So a developer gets to the office a Monday morning, and now they need to review all of these.
More
So
stuff.
it's a very big cognitive load on them. And I guess the analogy that I like to use the most is like, okay, unless you solve the rest of the development pipeline and you fix stuff there, you're basically trying to stream much more water to the same pipes. It won't go faster. You just move the problem to a different area in the development pipeline. So there's still like a lot of things like to fix there. Happy to talk about.
Yeah, this is very interesting because basically we're saying even if the LLMs allowed us to code, let's say, 2 times as fast or 3 times, we would still get bottlenecks in other parts of the SDLC. And especially, I can imagine code reviews that are now becoming even more toil on developers, especially they are now about code that maybe is even less and less under their own control because it's been written not by a colleague, by an AI. And there's a lot of conversation and concern around the fact that maybe you get short-term gains in productivity, but these are equalized or even more than that by long-term maintenance problems because it's code that you have less control on. I don't know what you're seeing from your point of view.
Yeah, I love this question because I think first of all you touched a very important point about code reviews, etc. There
Yeah.
are tools out there who are trying to say, "Hey, I have AI-based code review." Unfortunately, these tools today are point solutions. What does that mean? They will decorate a PR with a review. Now the developer can take the review, not take the review, and if the company didn't say, "Hey, you know what? I have a policy that I'm allowing, in certain cases, for an AI-based review to be the sole reviewer," you didn't get the productivity gain because you just did not. You just decorated the PR. That looking at PRs today, it's a long stream of like bots and things that are running. So unless you put some governance into it and an intent into like, okay, I'm going to experiment in some areas and I'm going to allow AI-based code review to be the sole reviewer in some cases, or if your policy in your company is two reviewers, so maybe one is human and one is AI, you don't get that gain. Now, the other point that you talked about like maintainability and short-term, productivity gains that you can take, but then pay the price in the long term, I think it touches like a very interesting point that the code that AI will generate for you, let's say you use some great prompts and it generated like great, whether it's coding assistant like Cursor Copilot or something else, I think like developers need to be more critic about what they're seeing and the code that they're getting, and apply the same things and the same thoughts about, hey, what's going to be the maintainability cost here? Read the code. Like we can talk about it, but I have concerns because there's senior developers and junior developers, and there's a big concern that senior developers are going to be an extinct animal because if you just take the code and put it and you don't like go in depth, you won't get that those senior developers. I think developers should be very critique on what they're seeing, the code that they're getting, put it in the realm exactly of what you said. Hey, what's the price of maintainability, etc., and apply the same principles and the same things that they would do if they will get the code from a fellow colleague or something like that, in order not to get to optimize for short-term productivity, exactly like you said, and pay the price like long term. We've seen, we still didn't release it yet, but we're starting to have like an interesting amount of data on the impact, and we're seeing one metric is code churn. How fast code is being spitted out of a system. We're starting to see that there's like a 2% increase on code churn that is being brought from like PRs that were assisted by these code generators. I'm not blaming the code generators. I think again it's the responsibility of the developers to be critique about what they're seeing and what they're pushing through the system.
Yeah, I think this is very interesting, and I think your last point is particularly interesting. That is, let's say we adopt AI tools, maybe we see increased code churn. That doesn't mean necessarily that the tools are bad, but that developers are using them in a mode where they are more like disengaged and they don't think critically anymore about coding. But one thing that I find it hard, even in my like small scale toy experiments, since I don't have a team anymore, is that it's so easy to approach these AI coding tools in a way that you just reduce your concentration, your cognitive load. You just go with the flow, and you easily get disengaged. So it's really up to the individual discipline to stay there and understand what the AI is doing. And so I understand that it's hard. So I'm empathetic, let's say.
Yeah, I think I'm empathetic as well. I think I think I talked about it in the interview as well. I don't remember, but I think it's a problem of individual developers that they need
Yeah,
to think how do they preserve knowledge and not just take, whether you use like an assistant or an agent like gave you, take it as it is. That's one thing. And companies also needs like to have programs. They want to continue to stay, they need to educate their engineering workforce in two ways. First of all, this is the big thing that's happening. You can't just ignore it because some senior developers are ignoring it. Like, hey,
yeah,
this won't work. I don't think it's right. Like, this is a big new thing. You gotta play with it, learn it. And on the other hand, for junior developers, companies need to educate them and build like education programs that preserve the knowledge and
yeah,
make sure that they encourage and create incentives for the people to understand deeper what they're doing
yeah,
and not just take the code and throw it away. Otherwise, like the tech debt will rise like in year two and year one and year two. Okay, you got to an MVP.
yeah.
In year one and year two, like you're going to be like deeply into tech debt.
So when you think, because I want to follow up on this, when you think of the teams that you know that are using AI best, taking the most advantage, so you think that they created programs, that is that they made an intentional investment in making the teams use AI in a way that is controlled, as opposed to just we buy licenses of, I don't know, Cursor to everyone on the team and we leave it to the people.
Yeah, yeah. I think I can characterize like the dilemmas and the questions that I'm seeing like organizations going through today. I would characterize them into three questions. Question number one, and it kind of like goes hand in hand with like the journey of AI adoption because it's almost like three stages, right? Coding assistant, people experimented with it last
Yeah,
year. This year they're rolling it out. Then there's augmentation where you can ask some questions with prompts, and it's almost like you have another member in your team. And
yeah,
the third phase will be AI native or AI first. The team will be hybrid. You have like 3 agents, 2 people,
yeah,
something like that. If you think about the journey and where people are today, I think there are three questions that I can see them asking themselves and us. And question number one: I invested in Copilot, Cursor, whatever, like coding assistants. How can I measure not just the adoption? That's the first question. Adoption, are
yeah,
people using it? But also the impact.
yeah,
And you touched the point, Luca. You talked about how complex it is. You can optimize for short-term productivity gain, okay, high throughput, etc. But then more problems. So make sure you measure the impact, that the quality is there, etc. That's question number one. Question number two is like, okay, I'm seeing all these blog posts about these AI first companies that just starting now and they're putting things out of scratch, in 2 days and less. And there's such a big gap between them and companies that are now processes and teams, etc. So how do I bridge the gap? How do I start experimenting with things? So again, I don't need to be there in 2 seconds to jump over there, but how can I start experimenting with some AI native and AI first development, maybe code reviews, but
yeah,
governed? Maybe the third question that people are asking themselves, hey, what's going to happen to my teams? How will they look like in the future? I
yeah.
think that's the question that every board, CEO, engineering leaders are asking themselves right now. Yeah, these are not simple questions to
Yeah,
answer.
I think they're fantastic questions, and now that you asked them, I think we have to try to answer them. So I will
Yeah.
try to go through them because I think the first one that you mentioned is so relevant. I mean, I know many people, some are friends of mine that they have bought the licenses, they are encouraging adoption, but they don't know generally what is the impact that these AI tools are bringing to overall productivity or outcome that the team is able to produce. Sometimes they're not even able to measure pure adoption even before you get to value, right? But in general, I think it's still unclear how do you figure out if AI is really benefiting your team. So I know your product works a lot with measuring productivity, measuring value. So what's your take on this?
Yeah, our take on it is, first of all, in terms of adoption, some of these systems provide APIs
Yeah,
that you can like figure out adoption. That's great. That's a great start. But also, we worked hard in the last 3 years on, I think we're a different kind of like animal in the space of our competition. I don't want to talk too much about our company, but about implementing something, a component called Gitstream that will help you label the PRs as they come in through the
yeah,
system. So now you can look on the other side and kind of compare and see, okay, let's look at what happens to cycle time for PRs that are generated by or assisted by Copilot versus the baseline, the rest of the universe. Same
yeah,
goes for code churn. Same goes for bugs. Same, like every aspect of it, you can compare between the two. And I think if you have a program that you want to understand, if it gives you this not just short term, feeling that, oh, I'm like developing faster, but also like long term, longevity with productivity. You got to measure these
yeah,
things. So that's how I answer question number one. Put
yeah,
a program, go and adopt, measure the adoption, but measure also the impact. Otherwise, like you would just not won't know.
yeah.
So
So basically, we are saying AI is here to augment people work, and we should just measure, the main KPIs that we're already tracking, thinking cycle time and maybe DORA metrics and all engineering metrics that we know very well, and figure out how they are changing when AI is in the loop, whether
yeah,
it's creating code like autonomously or assisting humans and in doing so.
I think first of all, yes, but I think it's much more relevant for the era that we live in now, where most of the companies are still rolling out coding assistants
Yeah,
and still not like the fully AI native, which is like the second question that people ask. Hey, how can I get started with AI native development? I'm a big company. I have processes. I need to go
yeah,
through SOC 2. I need to go through like, how do I even do that with confidence, etc. So the answer there is, as always, like in software, iterate, carve out the services that maybe are still not production scale, still in incubation, everybody with their own thing, and say, you know what, in this project, I'm allowing AI first development. For example, I'm allowing AI-based code review to participate, sometimes be even the sole reviewer. So you need something to write, to define the policy, right? To write the
yeah,
policy that will say, hey, in this area of the code base it's allowed, in this area of the code base it's not allowed. That gives like an organization confidence. Again, I don't want to brag, but that's how we build like our product now.
yeah,
To start rolling out this thing and start experiment and then expand, like, and you can see that they are okay, they're doing it in incubation projects and now they're rolling it out like to more projects. That's like kind of how I recommend answering the second questions. Like you
yeah,
need to carve out like these areas where you're allowing yourself to take a little bit more risk, but a mitigated risk, a risk that you have the tools like to write the policy of what's allowed and what's not allowed. Make sure, see a full-blown audit log that it acted like you intended it to happen, and not that an agent spin up like a pull request, another
yeah,
agent did a review, and another agent said, okay, I'm releasing the code. You get a sense, you get not just a sense, you get a control around this,
yeah.
and then you get confidence on rolling out with AI native. That's how you close the gap between those AI native companies that you read, that you envy, because you read exactly like you said, like the social media post, oh, I built an app in 2 days, etc.
Yeah, yeah. And in fact, I think this is where most of this anxiety, for engineering leaders comes from, because you hear these stories that seem like magical, and you look at your team, and the reality is far from that kind of dream. And it looks like it's not a matter of tools, because the tools are like the same for everybody. So sometimes you wonder why does this gap exist, right? So do you also think that teams, when it comes to teams and team organization, team structure, skills that things that developers will do will change to adjust and enable more productivity? Because there are other trends like developers maybe becoming a little bit more full stack, owning more things to take advantage of this increased productivity. So do you think that teams will change in this respect?
Yeah, I definitely think that teams will change over time. They will need to adapt to this movement and this change. I think I think that it's almost like what I said before. Senior developers. By the way, I'm seeing senior developers that are adopting these tools. It's like a gift. You remember how we say, okay, the 10x and the 100x developers? These are the people because then they can activate, 2 or 3 agents, but they're very critique on what they're getting. That's where you get like the multiplier. So it's almost
Yeah.
like if organizations will have a lot of like these people that are, progressing how they think, they're not like stagnated. No, I'm not going to use AI at all.
Yeah.
But they're responsible in critique, and this is the best present that I think organization can have at this
Yeah.
point in time. Then and I think for junior developers, it's about what we spoke about, like don't just like take the code, put it in, break one thing, take another code to fix what you just broke, and just move on to the next service. Like go deeper. And yeah, I think developers will need to be great prompters. They will need to kind of understand how to write good prompts. How do they bring good context? The definition of developer will change over time. I don't think, by the way, there's a question that people ask me, hey, is there going to be less developers? My reaction, by the way, usually is, unfortunately, I think that as an immediate reaction, some of the companies that are reading the news, etc., and they get pressure from, economical pressure from board and etc., will make the moves even now early, still without the proof of the productivity. So I think short term it could happen, but I think long term companies will need like more developers. It's almost like streaming, right? So every time like there's more streaming, you can, I don't know, see movies faster and put
Yes.
more applications, and then the bandwidth is stronger and it gets filled. So I don't think there's going to be less developers over time. They will just need to add skills, not just understand how to write code, understand how to read code. By the way, it's very important. People don't like as developers. I always say as developers because I still myself as a developer, even though I'm not writing code anymore. That's where I started. We don't like to read code as much as we like to write code. So that's a skill. Read code. Learn how to read code and be critique about it. Yeah, learn how to work with the system, how to write a good prompt. That's going to be like the full blown definition of a good developer in the future, I think.
Yeah, I love that. And I agree on your take, by the way, that AI will not make us, I mean, it will not make companies use less developers to write the same amount of software, but use, I think, generally speaking, as many developers, or maybe even more developers to write even more software because now it's cheaper to do that. But maybe as a short-term reaction that is irrational, it's not grounded in reality, but grounded on, mandates from leadership, from financial hardship. There might be companies that restrict their developers base, but it doesn't make sense when you look at the opportunity. That's my feeling.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, again, hopefully no cuts, but more like, okay, teams won't grow because I'm reading in the news that, and I'm seeing that we can do more with less developers. So I think that's going to be the immediate reaction,
Yeah,
especially in these unstable economical times. But over time, I always say software is great for if it's used for good purposes,
yeah,
and you'll still be missing developers, and you will still trying to do like more with existing developers, and yeah, AI will help you to do more.
yeah.
But your competitors have 50 and you have 50 developers, you won't say, okay, I can cut. You will want to compete. So I don't see over time. I'm not a prophet.
Hmm.
I might be wrong. I've been wrong a lot of times in the past, but I don't think there's going to be less developers.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the disclaimer is that these conversations are always very risky. We make predictions that in
Yeah,
just, a couple of weeks might be disproved, and so we publish this at our own risk.
yeah,
But anyway, and I think it's also interesting the difference between junior and senior developers that you mentioned. I mean, in my experience, when I speak with junior developers, they're pretty much all excited by these developments. While when you speak with senior developers, the picture kind of changes. There are those who jump on the ship and are very excited. They say, wow, this is a dream. I can do so much more. And then there are the very skeptical ones that kind of hate AI. They say it sucks joy out of my work. And there are many trending blog posts on Hacker News. There is this whole like skeptic, but it's not just about skepticism. I mean, many agree about the value, but they're just sad, and they don't want to stop coding manually. I think it's a cultural thing. I don't know if you see that, and I don't know if you have some words of comfort for for these people or a way to shift their mindset.
yeah. I can totally understand. Like I said, even though I'm not developing, but I don't know if you see, but I'm wearing a shirt. Or my shirt is like Sinclair Spectrum ZX. That's my first computer. It's
Yeah.
very. It's.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't plan for this, but it's one of my favorite T-shirts. And I just remember like sitting in like programming in BASIC on my first computer. It's like so fun. And I'm imagining if I would, if I'm putting myself in their shoes and I'm a developer now, I really love it. I remember like programming hours and hours and hours and hours. And then somebody comes in and said, okay, you know what? It might be taken away from you because AI can do the same thing. So I can really be empathetic like to that feeling. I would just say that, like I said before, I don't think it's taking it away. I think it's just changing the definition of what a developer does. And
Mm-hmm.
I would say, sometimes we hire people and people talk to me about, I've seen other companies do mistakes about the age of the developers that they bring in. And I have one judgment that I'm telling like my managers, don't look, of course, at the age, but look at the openness for change. I've
Yes.
seen people that are like very young and not willing to change and be coachable and learn new things, and the opposite, people who are senior developers, a little bit older, their mind is so open and they're open to new ideas. So I don't think it's an age thing.
Yeah.
I just my words for them is like, hey, the change is coming. Embrace it. Go and learn. Go and reprogram yourself on what gives you the fun. Like you'll still find fun in this. Don't worry. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
probably not be like writing every letter, but it's still like a lot of fun in the creation and in architectural decisions. At the end of the day,
Yes.
people need people that understand big systems and can analyze. So yeah, my advice is don't ignore this, and my words to strengthen them is like it could still be fun. Like it's just a
I agree.
change. Our world is changing.
I agree, and I also think that I mean sometimes we kind of romanticize the work of us as developers because it's not like everything we do is funny. I mean there are a lot of things that are not funny, and hopefully AI can take a lot of this off of our plate. I mean a lot of documentation, testing, a lot of toil around things that we would be so happy to give mostly to AI and spend our time more on the very high value stuff like, I don't know, system design, architecture, really the high value things. And as you say, even if you don't write every single letter of the code anymore, I think you will still retain the core aspects that make you enjoy the work and possibly even let go of instead of the things that you despise. That's my optimistic take.
Yeah, I agree with you. And by the way, in the experiments that we spoke before, if like I want to start like something with AI first, yeah, I would encourage to start with, because like we said, the big companies have a little bit of fear. How do I do it? Start with the things that are less risky. We added just a PR description thing. Like instead of writing a PR description, AI does this for you. It's just
Yeah.
amazing. Nobody
Yeah.
wants to write PR description anymore because it collects all the context. documentation. These are the areas like to get started and to get confidence. And yeah, of course, like for senior developers, that's a good point. Like, hey, you can now focus more on like building and not like writing a long like description, which is important, like because somebody needs to review the code. Somebody will need to learn from this pull request later. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I agree. No, I totally agree. And I think you brought a great point about also using AI for other things that are not coding, because I think the most exposure of examples and the vast majority of examples and stories you see online are about AI coding, like writing code. But the software development life cycle has much more than that. Coding is just one piece. And I think AI can help with a lot of other stuff. So, in your experience, where is the AI the most helpful in the development process, even outside of pure writing code?
Yeah, so I think, like I said, because we have this problem of PR and pull request inflation, even before AI with the
Yeah.
bots and now with AI more, still even before like everybody adopted like AI first and AI native, there's an inflation. So you're like throwing a lot of water into the same pipeline. So there's other processes, there's code reviews. I think that's one of the biggest opportunities to open up like the pipelines to stream changes faster.
Mm.
I would focus there. And again, like I said before, not code reviews just for the sake of decoration, just for the sake of adding PRs. You also have to add a policy of when am I allowing AI to be the reviewer, the soil
Mm.
reviewer. Maybe it's on all my repos, maybe it's on specific repos. Then I think a test suggestion, the same like test completion and all of that. That's a great opportunity. Again, it has to be the same critique.
Yeah.
Okay, not tests are very important. People say, "Oh, it's just a test." No, like this is the thing that makes sure that your quality is in the right place. Sometimes I think they're more important than the code itself because they're like the guardrails that's keeping you like the quality high. Those are like the areas that
Yeah.
I think, and I'm waiting for cool solutions in the areas of smart decisions. I think there's already things like that, but smart decisions on CI and what to run in the CI based on the
Yes.
change. And I always say like smart decisions on CD as well,
Yeah.
because the CD is even now in 2025 is a zero-sum game. There's companies who say, okay, we're CD, like
Mm.
continuous deployment, like every change is going out, or we're
Mm.
not. Like changes are being like accumulated, and then there's a release. Why can't it be like conditional on the change? Like some changes can go immediately, some changes. So I'm looking for smart decisions and more AI on all of this pipeline, all the way up to opening up feature flags.
Yeah.
Those are like the opportunities that I think are still untapped. If somebody wants to start a startup company today,
Yeah.
I like to well.
It's very interesting because I actually, when I think about this, there are many parts of the, let's say, of the delivery process for many companies that rely on manual decisions. So the flow stops, and because a human needs to make a decision, whether it's this is now deployable or releasable, or the manual QA went well, or code reviews, of course, and many other things. And you're saying maybe for some types of changes, we can offload these decisions maybe in the easy situations to the AI.
I'm, I actually think a little bit different. I think that companies will want control on when to let AI take the decision.
Okay.
So I would
Okay.
want to write like a rule that says something like, I don't know, if I'm just inventing something, if the change didn't have vulnerabilities, it's a small change. Some human was involved, whether if AI wrote the code, a human reviewed, and vice versa. If human reviewed the code, some human was involved. Let's say it got all the way to CD. I want to write the rule that said all of this that I just described to you, and then say in these cases it's okay, like to go and let AI take a decision on what parts of the CI to run. So I think companies will want like control over the policy and over like the SDLC,
Yes.
but then say in what cases I'm deploying human and in what cases I'm allowing AI to take decisions. That's how I think, at least how I think the philosophy should be. And by the way, that's how we're trying to build our product.
Yeah, I think this is very interesting. And by the way, the underlying philosophy to this, you tell me if I'm wrong, is that you should think about where to use AI across the whole pipeline. Because otherwise, if you focus only on one step, let's say coding, you risk overloading and creating bottlenecks elsewhere. You made the examples of code reviews. If you just create more code and you focus on the coding phase, maybe AI is great at creating code, but you don't do anything on the rest of the SDLC. Developers are overwhelmed by code reviews. So if you work on coding, you have to work also on code reviews. You have to work on CD and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. That's if you just work on generating more code, your developers you just make them less happy because the backlog of things that they will need to review is huge. Again, just a research that we had before AI, 15% of the PRs are bot generated. And that's still developers need to look, hey, is this update legit? Yes or no? And so that's a lot of like
it just doesn't work. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think you answered this already kind of before, but I wanted to ask you again. So if, let's say, you put yourself, even as a wrap-up question that I think it's useful for many who are listening to this. So let's say you are an engineering leader who needs to navigate this transition and try to adopt AI in some way in the development process of their team. And your team is not doing anything in particular about that. Maybe somebody's using Cursor, but there is no like team policy, no team process that is actually enhanced by AI. So how would you go about it? So would you do some quick wins or create some ceremonies, or you would start small in some way? What would be your first steps?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of options, but I think it's funny. You asked like, hey, do we do like small wins? Sometimes you do small wins because sometimes it's not all the time because you get pressure. Hey, like show me that you're doing from management. But let's say you have good managers and output a program, and I would say, hey, this is where the world is right now. We're experimenting with coding assistants. Great. I'm going to deploy something that measures not just the adoption, but the impact, because I want to see how it helps us, and I want to report up, it helps us this way. Yeah, the throughput is higher, but I'm keeping an eye that the quality doesn't go low. If I'm seeing it, like I'm going to have a talk with the developers to be more critical. So that's how I would start. I would deploy things like that to reduce the toil, like the simple stuff that are low risk, PR descriptions, and things like that. And I would build a plan also on the AI first and AI native use cases. Hey, we have this incubation project. In this project, we're going to let AI do the code reviews, and then we can take code reviews maybe to other places, more production ready, like in our app. So I will build a program that combines like these things. And the third element, I would be proactive about what am I doing with my team. And I would run like education programs. And it goes both ways. An education program for the senior developers not to be stagnated and learn these new tools. An education program for the junior developers on how to still be critique and how to read code and understand system deeply. And then I think it kind of like puts engineering managers in a good place where they're not reactive to pressure coming. Okay, cut your team by 10%. No, I built a program. Here's how it looks. Here's how I'm taking care of like all the elements that you asked me. AI first, like I'm taking care of my team, I'm educating them. So that's my recommendation, like for engineering managers on how to roll out and give confidence to upper management.
Love this.
Yeah.
Love this, because what you're saying basically is that you would both take care of some basics, of some baselines, but also try some like small moonshots, try to address something from an AI first, like agentic or something like that approach, not to be dogmatic about anything. I mean, let's see how it works. Let's see how it goes, right?
Yes, and manage your risk. Choose the areas where your CISO doesn't, wow, like we can't have this. Like, okay, show that you are aware to the risk, so you're doing it in areas of still that are like maybe not production scale, and then gradually move to production.
Yeah, I agree. And I love when you mentioned about education. So helping people use this tool well, right? And I think this is an area where sometimes there are misconceptions that you just jump in and write simple prompts and you get the best out of these tools. While in my experience, and I wanted to ask about yours, good prompting not only makes a huge difference, but it's a skill by itself. So I needed to educate myself quite a lot about that. So I don't know what you're saying about this.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I said before, but you're right. I should have repeated. One of the skills that developers need to learn. Remember, you asked me about the developers that are sad because you're taking away from me coding everything. Hey, that's a very interesting field to learn. And that field is like, first of all, how do you bring a lot of context? And then how do you phrase the questions, the prompts, which is a very important skill to learn. And I admit, like, I'm not, again, because I'm not every day like programming right now. I meet a developer like here, like in LinearB where I work, and I say, yes, I envy you because you, on one hand, like, okay, but are you living in an area where so many things are happening? If I was you, I would just sit and learn how to write good prompts, and enrich the context, etc. So you're absolutely right. I think that's one of the things that one of the parts in the education program. How do I bring more data, and how do I phrase the questions the right way?
Yeah, I totally agree. So love this. Thank you, Ori, so much for the great chat. I took so many notes, and I will make more experiments with AI and also let you know how it goes.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Excited to hear. Thank you for having me. It's always great.
Thank you. It was great. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this chat valuable, you can subscribe to the show on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find the show. You can find all past episodes and learn more about the show at refactoring.fm. See you in the next episode.